The courtroom fell silent the moment I pushed through those heavy doors. My daughter Jessica's lips curved into a smirk, that same self-satisfied expression she'd worn since she was 16 and thought she'd gotten away with something. Her husband Brad sat beside her, scrolling through his phone like this was just another inconvenience in his busy schedule. They were looking at a confused old woman who'd hand over everything without a fight. Then the prosecutor, Maria Gonzalez, glanced up from her notes. The color drained from her face. Her pen slipped from her fingers and clattered across the table. "Victoria Martinez?" Her voice cracked. "Special Agent Martinez?" The shadow? Every head in that Travis County courtroom turned. Jessica's smirk dissolved. Brad's phone froze mid-scroll. Even their attorney, some fresh-faced associate from a downtown firm, looked completely lost. Nobody in that room knew who I really was. My own daughter had forgotten. Or maybe she'd never bothered to learn. I need to back up. You need to understand how I ended up here, sitting across from my only child while she tried to have me declared mentally incompetent so she could control my life savings. It's a complicated story, but you'll see why I did what I did. My name is Victoria Martinez, and for 30 years, I was a special agent with IRS Criminal Investigation. Not the people who audit your tax returns. We're the ones who hunt down money launderers, tax evaders, and financial criminals. They called me the Shadow because I could follow money trails through shell corporations and offshore accounts that criminals thought were invisible. I'd taken down Ponzi schemes, bust underground casinos, and helped prosecute organized crime through their tax violations. Al Capone wasn't the only criminal we caught that way. I retired 5 years ago at 62. My husband, Robert, had been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Watching him fight for every day, that was harder than any case I'd ever worked.
The path
The
to
chemo
success
ravaged
isn't
him,
always linear,
but he never
But with
complained.
dedication
He'd
and
smile
clarity,
at me from his hospital
you
bed
can
and tell me
navigate
bad
any
jokes,
challenge.
even when speaking hurt him. I took early retirement to be with him. The agency wanted me to stay, offered me flexible hours, but I couldn't split my focus. Robert had supported my career through missed anniversaries, late nights, and weeks away tracking financial criminals across state lines. It was my turn to be there. We'd lived in Austin for 25 years, in a ranch-style house in Westlake Hills. Robert had spent years fixing it up, adding a deck, landscaping the yard, installing a pool. He'd loved that house. Even during the worst of the cancer treatments, he'd sit out back and watch the sunset over the hills. Our daughter Jessica lived 30 minutes away in a new development near Round Rock. She was 39, worked as a medical office manager, made decent money. We'd never been particularly close. My work had created distance. But I thought we had a functional relationship. She was busy with her family. I was busy with mine. When Robert got sick, Jessica visited maybe twice a month. Always brief, always with her phone buzzing, always with Tyler in tow. My grandson was 9 then, quiet and thoughtful. He'd sit with Robert and show him drawings or read to him when Robert was too weak to hold a book himself. Then Robert died 18 months ago. The cancer won after a 14-month fight. I held his hand in hospice and felt something crack inside me. Not break completely. I'd investigated too many tragedies to shatter that easily. But crack deep enough that I knew I'd carry it forever. Jessica came to the funeral. Brad came too, checking sports scores during the eulogy. Tyler was 13 then, and he held my hand when I couldn't speak during my goodbye to his grandfather. After Robert died, the house felt wrong. Too big, too empty, too full of memories. I started spending more time with Tyler. He'd come over after school, and we'd work on his homework or I'd teach him to cook Robert's favorite recipes. He reminded me of Robert at that age, thoughtful, curious, uncomfortable with small talk. Jessica and Brad started visiting more after the funeral. At first I thought they cared, but their visits followed a pattern. They'd walk through the house commenting on how I was keeping up with things, suggesting maybe the house was too much for one person. Brad would check the pool equipment, mention how expensive repairs could be. Jessica would go through my mail, making concerned noises about bills and paperwork. Then came the phone calls. Was I eating right? Had I been to the doctor? Was I taking my medications correctly? The questions felt rehearsed, like they were building documentation. 4 months after Robert died, they took me to lunch at this expensive steakhouse in downtown Austin. Brad ordered for me, some fish I didn't want, and then they pitched their proposal. They wanted me to sell the house, move into a senior living community. They'd help manage my finances, take care of all those complicated decisions. I wouldn't have to worry about anything. I smiled and thanked them, told them I was fine. The house was paid off, my pension was solid, and I wasn't ready to give up my independence. Jessica's smile tightened. Brad looked annoyed. They dropped it, but I recognized the look in their eyes. I'd seen it in suspects when they realized their first approach hadn't worked. I started paying attention. Real attention. The way I used to on cases. Jessica began mentioning my forgetfulness. Didn't I remember we'd planned lunch for Thursday? Hadn't I promised to babysit Tyler next weekend? I kept detailed notes in my phone and checked them obsessively. I hadn't forgotten anything. She was manufacturing plans that never existed, then expressing concern when I couldn't confirm them. Brad would visit and move things in my house. "Just helping organize, Victoria," he'd say. Then Jessica would drop by and comment on how disorganized everything looked. I started taking photos of every room before they visited. Tyler noticed something was off. He was 14 now, sharp in a way that reminded me of myself. He'd watch his parents during visits with this careful, analytical expression. After they'd leave, he'd ask quiet questions. "Grandma, are you really forgetting stuff?" I told him I wasn't. He believed me. The petition arrived 6 months ago. Jessica and Brad filed for guardianship, claiming I had early onset dementia.
In my time leading this department,
They had
I've learned that
evidence,
true innovation
photos of
often
my
comes from
supposedly
unexpected
disorganized
places.
house,
It's about empowering
statements
your
from
team
Jessica
to explore
about my
new
memory
ideas.
problems, a note from a doctor I'd never seen claiming I'd missed appointments. A social worker came to evaluate me. Nice woman named Sandra, about 45, who asked careful questions and looked around my house with worried eyes. I could see what she saw. An elderly widow living alone in a big house, someone still grieving, someone who might need support. I played it carefully, confused enough to seem concerning, but not so far gone she'd recommend immediate intervention. Sandra noted concerns on her evaluation and recommended follow-up monitoring, because by then, I'd figured out what Jessica and Brad were really doing. It started with small things I noticed during their visits. Brad would take phone calls in my kitchen, thinking I wasn't listening. Medical billing codes, patient account numbers, Medicare reimbursement amounts. But his tone was wrong. Too nervous, too defensive. Then I overheard them arguing one evening when they thought I was asleep upstairs. "We need that house money now," Brad had hissed. "The audit is in 2 months, if they find the ghost patients before we can cover the accounts." "I know," Jessica cut him off. "That's why we're pushing the guardianship. Once we have control." They'd stop talking when they heard me on the stairs. I'd spent 30 years following money trails. I knew exactly what I was hearing. That night, I pulled out my old case files from the garage. Not the classified ones, those stayed with the agency, but my personal notes, my methodology, my contacts. I might be retired, but I still remembered how to investigate. I started with the medical office Jessica managed, made some calls to former colleagues who owed me favors, found out Jessica handled billing for a mid-sized internal medicine practice. Perfect opportunity for Medicare fraud if you were smart about it. Bill for services never rendered, create ghost patients, upcode procedures. I needed access to billing records. That meant I needed them to think I wasn't a threat. So I became the confused old woman they wanted me to be. I started forgetting things during their visits. What day was it? Had they called yesterday? I'd wander around looking for my reading glasses when they were hanging around my neck. I'd tell the same story twice in one conversation. I made myself into exactly what their petition claimed. Jessica seemed relieved. Brad looked satisfied. They stopped being careful around me. I wore loose cardigans to hide the small recording device I'd borrowed from a former colleague. IRS criminal investigation grade equipment, completely legal as long as I was part of the conversation. I recorded every visit, every phone call, every word they said in my house. Brad got careless. He'd take calls right in front of me, discussing billing codes and patient accounts with someone named Derek. He assumed I was too confused to understand. He was wrong. I cross-referenced patient names from Brad's conversations with Medicare billing records I accessed through a contact at HHSOIG. Found 5 patient accounts at Jessica's practice, all elderly, all with cognitive decline or deceased, all billing Medicare for regular treatments they'd never received. I contacted the families, Told them I was writing a book about elder care, researching medical billing practices. 3 families were happy to talk. All confirmed their loved ones had never received half the treatments being billed to Medicare. I compiled everything: billing records, recordings, false claims documentation. I built an investigation file that would have made my old team proud. Then came the moment that almost broke me. It was a Tuesday morning. I woke up feeling off, dizzy, disoriented. I'd read enough case files to know what a stroke might feel like. I called Jessica. "Sweetie, I need you to take me to the hospital. Something's wrong. I think I'm having a stroke." There was a pause. A long pause where I could hear her breathing. "Mom, I'm at work. We're really busy today. Can you call 911? I don't want to make a fuss. I just need—" "Mom, that's what emergency services are for. I really can't leave right now." The line went dead. I sat there on my bedroom floor, phone shaking in my hand, and felt something I hadn't felt in 30 years of investigating criminals. Pure heartbreak. Not from the possible stroke, it turned out to be an inner ear infection, but from realizing my daughter cared more about her schedule than whether I was dying. I called Tyler instead. He was at school but saw my text and called back immediately. "Grandma? What's wrong? I need help. I'm dizzy. I can't stand up." "I'm coming. Stay there. I'm calling 911 and I'm coming." He did both. The paramedics arrived in 9 minutes. Tyler got there in 15, having convinced his school nurse to let him leave. He held my hand in the ambulance. He sat with me through the ER tests. He was there when they confirmed it was an infection, not a stroke, but I should follow up with my doctor. Jessica showed up 3 hours later. Brad came with her, looking irritated. "See, Mom?" Jessica said, like she was explaining to a child. "This is why we're concerned. These panic attacks, the confusion, you need more support than you're getting."
Welcome,
Tyler stared
I'm
at his
glad
mother
you're here
with
to
something
learn
like
about this new
contempt.
initiative.
"She called
I'm
you this morning,
confident
Mom.
it will bring positive
She asked
changes
for help,
to our
and
community."
you hung up. "I was working, Tyler. Grandma needs to learn to use emergency services appropriately. She thought she was having a stroke, which is exactly why trained professionals should handle it, not family members who aren't qualified." I watched Jessica perform these mental gymnastics and saw her clearly for the first time. This wasn't the little girl I'd raised. This wasn't even the distant adult daughter I'd made peace with. This was a stranger who'd been coached on exactly how to frame my incompetence for maximum legal advantage. Brad put his hand on Jessica's arm. "We're just worried, Victoria. These incidents keep piling up. Maybe it's time to seriously consider our proposal." I looked at his carefully composed face and thought, you have no idea what's coming. 2 weeks later, we were in court for the competency hearing. Their lawyer presented evidence, photos, medical reports, statements from Jessica about my declining condition. The social worker testified about her concerns. Even my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, had been convinced to testify that she'd seen me wandering my yard in my bathrobe looking confused. I sat there in my cardigan and slacks, playing the confused elderly woman. I fumbled with my water glass. I asked the judge to repeat questions. I looked appropriately overwhelmed. Their lawyer was confident. Jessica looked sympathetic but determined. Brad kept checking his phone. Then my lawyer stood up. I'd hired Frank Morrison, an old colleague from my IRS-CI days who'd retired and gone into private practice. Frank was 70, looked like someone's grandfather, and had one of the sharpest financial minds in Texas. "Your Honor," Frank said quietly, "the defense would like to call a witness." "What witness?" their lawyer sputtered. There was no witness disclosure. "The defendant herself," Frank said. "Victoria Martinez would like to testify." That's when Prosecutor Gonzalez really looked at me. She'd worked with me 12 years ago on a major Medicare fraud case. I'd helped her follow the money trail through 3 shell corporations. She'd told reporters my testimony was the most precise financial evidence she'd ever seen presented. "Special Agent Martinez," she said, and the courtroom erupted. Jessica's lawyer started objecting. Jessica looked confused. Brad went very still. I stood up, and it was like shedding a disguise. The confused elderly woman disappeared. I straightened my shoulders, met the judge's eyes, and let him see exactly who I was. "Your Honor, I apologize for the deception, but I needed certain parties to believe I was exactly what they claimed: incompetent, confused, easy to manipulate. They needed to feel safe enough to incriminate themselves. I turned to Jessica and Brad. While you were building your case about my supposed incompetence, I was building a case of my own. About Medicare fraud, conspiracy to commit elder abuse, and theft from the federal government. Jessica stood up. This is ridiculous, Your Honor. She's clearly— Sit down, Mrs. Patterson, Judge Reynolds said quietly. His tone could have frozen fire. Frank handed me a folder. I opened it and pulled out the first document. Your Honor, I'd like to present evidence that Mr. Brad Patterson has been systematically defrauding Medicare through false billing at Westlake Internal Medicine, where my daughter Jessica Martinez Patterson works as office manager. Over the past 18 months, they've submitted approximately $340,000 in fraudulent claims. I placed billing records on the evidence table. These are Medicare billing statements for 5 patients: Robert Chen, Dorothy Williams, Frank Garcia, Helen Rodriguez, and James Thompson. All elderly. All with cognitive decline or deceased. All allegedly receiving regular treatments they never got. I pulled out another set of documents. These are statements from the families confirming their loved ones never received these services. And these are the recordings of Mr. Patterson discussing the scheme. Brad had gone white. Their lawyer was frantically flipping through papers. Mr. Patterson and my daughter needed money quickly because the practice is undergoing a Medicare audit in 6 weeks. They knew the fraud would be discovered. They needed a large influx of cash to cover the false claims before the audit revealed their theft. I turned to Jessica, my baby girl, who I'd rocked to sleep and taught to ride a bike and loved more than my own life. My daughter Jessica knew about the fraud. She helped facilitate it through her position as office manager. And instead of stopping when she realized they'd get caught, she agreed to help Brad gain access to my assets by having me declared incompetent. They planned to force the sale of my home and use the proceeds to cover their Medicare fraud before the audit. That's not I didn't, Jessica stammered. I connected my phone to the courtroom's audio system. Frank had gotten the technical setup approved that morning. I'm going to play several recordings now. These were all made in my home during conversations I was party to.
I want to share a story
They're
about how
completely
dedication
legal
and a
under
clear vision
Texas
can
one-party
truly change the
consent law.
trajectory of your career.
The first recording
it started
played.
about 10 years ago,
Brad's
right
voice
here in this
crystal
office.
clear. We need that house money now. The audit is in 2 months. If they find the ghost patients before we can cover the accounts, I'm looking at federal prison. Jessica's voice. I know. But we have to be careful with the guardianship. If she fights it? Brad's voice. She won't. Look at her. She can barely remember what day it is. The courtroom was silent except for the recording. I played 3 more, each more damning than the last. Brad discussing how to manipulate the social worker's evaluation. Jessica coaching Brad on what to tell their lawyer. Brad on the phone with Derek, instructing him to delete billing records. In the last recording, Brad said something that made the court reporter stop typing. Once we get control of her finances, we move her into memory care. She won't even understand what's happening. And if she dies in there before the money runs out, well, Tyler inherits everything anyway, and he's young enough that we can control him until he's 18. Tyler made a small sound from where he sat in the gallery. I couldn't look at him. If I looked at him, I'd break. Your Honor, Frank said into the silence. We're requesting immediate dismissal of the guardianship petition. Additionally, we're requesting an emergency investigation into the Medicare fraud and immediate protective measures for the patient families. Judge Reynolds looked at Brad like he was something scraped off a shoe. Mr. Patterson, you have the right to remain silent. I strongly suggest you exercise it. Bailiff, contact the U.S. Attorney's Office. I want someone from their healthcare fraud division here immediately. He turned to Jessica. Mrs. Patterson, you're not currently charged with any crime, but I'd advise you to obtain independent legal counsel. The attorney representing you and your husband has an obvious conflict of interest. Jessica sat frozen. She looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw the moment she understood what she'd done. Not just the legal implications, but the moral weight of trying to erase her own mother to cover up stealing from sick elderly people. Mom, she whispered, I thought I didn't think. You thought I was weak, I said quietly. You thought I was confused and forgettable. You thought I'd become invisible. I pulled out one more document and handed it to Frank. Your Honor, regardless of criminal proceedings, I'm filing for a permanent restraining order against Jessica and Brad Patterson. Additionally, I'm petitioning for emergency custody of my grandson, Tyler Martinez Patterson, age 14. Tyler stood up in the gallery. I want to live with my grandmother. Judge Reynolds looked at him, then at Jessica. Does the mother have any objection? Jessica opened her mouth, but nothing came out. What could she say? She'd just been exposed trying to steal from her own mother to cover federal fraud. Custody is granted temporarily, pending a full hearing, Judge Reynolds said. Mr. Tyler will be released to his grandmother's care today. Mrs. Patterson, you're to have no contact with either your mother or your son until further court order. The bailiff escorted Brad out in handcuffs. He didn't look at anyone. Jessica sat at the table, staring at her hands. I gathered my papers and walked toward Tyler. I was almost there when I heard Jessica speak. Mom. I stopped but didn't turn around. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. Now I turned, looked at my daughter, my only child, the baby I'd loved more than anything. You didn't realize I was a person? I said quietly. You didn't realize that being old doesn't mean being stupid? Or did you just not realize I'd catch you? I thought Brad said we needed. Brad said what you wanted to hear. He gave you permission to do what was convenient. Don't hide behind him, Jessica. You made your choices. Can I fix this? Can I make this right? I thought about that. About 30 years of reading financial criminals, understanding what drove them, what could redeem them, what was too broken to repair. I don't know, I said honestly. You tried to erase me, to make me legally invisible so you could steal from Medicare and from me. You hung up on me when I thought I was having a stroke. You used my grief over your father's death as a weapon. Tyler came to stand beside me. He didn't look at his mother. But I'm not going to press charges against you personally, I continued. Brad, yes, he committed the fraud. You were an accomplice, but the U.S. attorney will decide how to handle that. What I can tell you is this. If you want any relationship with me or with your son, you're going to have to earn it. And that starts with taking full responsibility for what you did. Not what Brad made you do or what you thought you had to do. What you actually chose to do. I took Tyler's hand. I'm taking my grandson home now. When you're ready to be honest with yourself and with us, you know where to find me. We walked out of that courtroom together, Tyler and I. Behind us, I heard Jessica crying. I didn't look back. The next month was a blur. Brad was arrested and charged with Medicare fraud, conspiracy, and attempted elder abuse. The evidence I'd gathered led federal investigators to discover he'd created ghost patients at 3 different practices, not just one. Total fraud amount, over $800,000. Jessica cooperated with prosecutors and received immunity in exchange for testimony. The medical practice fired her immediately. Brad's business partner, Derek, was also arrested. Tyler moved into my house. We turned Robert's workshop into his room. He painted it dark blue and hung posters of bands I'd never heard of and set up his gaming computer. It was perfect. He asked me questions sometimes, late at night when we were both awake. How did you know? He asked one evening. About the fraud? The first phone call I overheard, I said. Brad mentioned billing codes in a way that sounded wrong, too defensive, and once I knew to look, the patterns were obvious. Did you know Mom was involved? Not at first. I hoped she wasn't. But the recordings made it clear she knew what Brad was doing and helped cover it up. Is she a bad person? That was harder. Your mom isn't a bad person, Tyler. She's a weak person. There's a difference. Bad people hurt others because they want to. Weak people hurt others because they're afraid. Your mom was afraid of losing the lifestyle Brad's income provided. Afraid of confronting hard truths. So she took the easy route. Is that forgivable? I don't know yet, but I know it's understandable. That doesn't make it okay, but it makes it human. Jessica wrote me letters, 12 of them. I read them all but didn't respond. She was in therapy, working on herself, trying to understand how she'd lost her way. She asked to see Tyler. I told her to write to him directly, let him decide. He read her letters but didn't respond at first. Then, 3 months after the court hearing, he wrote back. Just a short note. I miss you too, but I'm not ready yet. It was a start. Brad's trial happened 4 months later. I testified for 2 hours, walking the jury through the billing records and money trail. The prosecutor called it the most thorough financial investigation he'd ever seen from a civilian witness. Brad got 6 years in federal prison. Jessica came to my house 6 months after the hearing. Tyler was at school. I let her in but didn't offer coffee. "I've been in therapy 3 times a week," she said, "working through everything. Why I did it. Why I thought it was okay." "Good. I need to tell you something. I was jealous of you my whole life. You had this important career. You were this person everyone respected, and I was just me. Office manager. Nothing special. When Dad got sick and you retired to take care of him, part of me was relieved. Finally, you were just a regular person. Go on. Then when Dad died, you were still so strong, even grieving, and I realized I'd never be like you. I was almost 40, and I'd never done anything that mattered. Brad made me feel important. He needed me for the billing scheme. I felt like I was finally part of something bigger, even though I knew it was wrong. By making me smaller? By making you smaller," she agreed. "I told myself it was for your own good, that you'd be happier with less responsibility. I told myself a lot of lies. Why are you telling me this now?" "Because my therapist says I need to take responsibility without expecting forgiveness, that the work is the work, regardless of the outcome. So I'm not asking you to forgive me, Mom. I'm just telling you I understand what I did. I understand that I tried to erase you because it was easier than dealing with my own inadequacy." I sat with that for a long moment. "I wasn't a perfect mother," I said finally. "I missed too many school events, too many birthdays. I chose work over you more times than I want to count." "Yeah," she said. "You did. That doesn't excuse what you did." "No, it doesn't." We sat in silence. "Tyler misses you," I said finally. "He's angry, but he loves you. He needs his mother. Does he want to see me? I think you should ask him yourself. Write him a real letter. Tell him the truth. Let him decide." Jessica nodded. She left after that, shoulders hunched, but maybe a little less burdened. Tyler came home an hour later. Was that Mom's car? Yes. What did she want? To apologize, to explain, to start making amends. Do you believe her? I believe she wants to change. Whether she will, that takes time and action. I might be ready to see her soon. Not yet, but soon. That's your choice, sweetheart. There's no rush. That night, I went through old photo albums, found pictures of Jessica as a baby, a toddler, a little girl. In every photo where I appeared, I was in work clothes, always distracted, always somewhere else, even when I was physically present. I'd investigated hundreds of financial criminals. I'd helped prosecute some of the worst fraudsters in the country. But I'd failed to see my own daughter becoming someone who needed investigation. Maybe that was the real lesson. You could be brilliant at reading strangers and blind to the people closest to you. Professional success didn't equal personal success. Titles and accolades didn't make you a better mother. I thought about Robert, about how he'd supported my career even when it meant sacrificing time together. How he'd never made me choose because he knew the work mattered to me. How he'd loved me anyway. I hope I did right, I whispered to his photo. I hope you'd be proud. Tyler appeared in the doorway. Grandma? You okay? Just thinking about your grandfather. I wish I'd known him better before the cancer. He was remarkable. Patient, kind, strong in ways I never was. He would have handled your mother better than I did. You handled it fine. You stopped them. You protected us. That's what mattered. I could have stopped it earlier. Tyler sat next to me. Or maybe it still would have happened and you'd be blaming yourself for different reasons. You can't fix people who don't want to be fixed, Grandma. You taught me that. When did you get so wise? I learned from the best. He leaned against my shoulder. You know what I think? I think you did exactly what you needed to do. You protected yourself and gave Mom a chance to face what she'd done. That's more than most people would do. We sat there looking at old photos. Outside, Texas heat shimmered. The house creaked and settled. Somewhere in Austin, Jessica was probably sitting in her apartment, trying to figure out how to be better. Brad was in federal prison, facing consequences. And I was here, in the house Robert had loved, with my grandson beside me. Still standing, still strong, still Victoria Martinez. Not just the shadow, not just the confused old woman they'd tried to make me, but something more complex, human, flawed, trying. Some people think getting old means becoming invisible. They see gray hair and assume weakness. They forget that age is experience, that silence isn't confusion, it's observation, that the quiet old woman in the corner might be someone who's taken down financial criminals, followed money through offshore accounts, testified in federal court. My daughter forgot that. Her husband never learned it. They looked at me and saw an easy mark, a confused widow past her prime. They forgot I was the shadow. And by the time they remembered, it was far too late. I picked up my phone and texted an old colleague. "Coffee sounds good. Send me that case file you mentioned." After all, retirement didn't mean stopping. It just meant choosing your battles more carefully. And I'd gotten very good at choosing battles I could win. Outside, the Austin sunset painted the hills gold and orange. Inside, my grandson did homework at the kitchen table where his grandfather used to read the paper. I sat in Robert's favorite chair, exactly where I belonged. They tried to make me disappear. Instead, I'd reminded them why they used to call me the shadow. Because I could see them, I could track them, I could catch them, and they never saw me coming until it was too late.